Okay, ladies and gentlemen, what we have here is a demonstration of how to graph sines and cosines. This is some work we did this week, and we're going to go through that worksheet that's on my website for some of these questions. I'm going to try to focus on the odd numbers because what I'm going to say is I also have updated down here. You can see solutions to the even numbered questions. Okay, but I'm going to go through the details for the odds, and you have solutions for the evens. Alrighty, solutions for the evens for you as I go through the odd numbered questions. Alrighty, so I wrote them down in the iPad already, so we're going to start with y equals 3 sine 4x. Let's remember here, you need a couple of pieces of information here. First of all, this is our a value. A is 3. K here is 4. Okay.
Working on that.
All right, so
something went wrong. Please try again.
Siri's talking to me, and I'm not sure. Get out of here, Siri. Go away.
Okay.
Thank you, Siri. Just go away. Okay? So we're going to work with this information here. And remember, this is going to be the sine curve. We're going to graph sine. So this is all going to be important information for us. We're going to go down here. All right. Okay. So we're going to start with the amplitude, which is the absolute value of A, and in this case it's the absolute value of 3, which is 3. We have the amplitude. Your period is 2 pi over K, and so K here is 4. We're going to simplify that fraction, so we have our period now, ladies and gentlemen. The period is going to be pi over 2. So remember your definition of your interval of one cycle goes from 0 to p. We're only going to graph one cycle here. So that means the interval of one cycle is 0 to pi over 2 here. Okay. All right, so I guess I want to emphasize a few things, that the amplitude is 3. Your period, pi over 2, and then that interval of one cycle goes from 0 to pi over 2. Okay, now I think what I'm going to do is what I've been doing. Let me see if I have any graphs here. No. Yeah. Do we have any graphs to include? Real number line graphs? No. So, okay. We're just going to do what we've been doing in class. So we're going to try to sketch here. All right. Something like this. Okay. You got your x-axis. You got your y-axis. And what I'm going to do, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to copy this now. Or at least save an image, maybe. We'll just copy it. Okay. So here's what we're going to need to do. We have to determine where the amplitude, we're going to use the information about your amplitude here, okay? So here's what we're going to do. It's not to scale. Since the amplitude was 3, this is why we use that information here. Okay, so here's our amplitude. Now the interval of one cycle goes to 0 to pi over 2. So this is how we're going to use that period. And ladies and gentlemen, we're now going to have to determine again the halfway points. Okay? So 0 to pi over 2. Now halfway, again, remember, we're going to find halfway between the 0 and pi over 2. That looks like that's halfway. And yes, 0 is over here. So remember, this is where people are going to really need to do some arithmetic. The midpoint, halfway between 0 and 2, and that's really this m value here, okay? You add 0 on pi over 2 and you divide by 2. So this is all coming down to your arithmetic skills. And whether you remember how to divide a fraction, the fraction pi over 2, with the whole number 2. And this is how I look at this. Okay, we have a fraction up here, and we have a whole number down there. So you write this as, I would say, the horizontal definition of division. And then that tells you just multiply by the reciprocal of 2. And you multiply fractions horizontally across. So this is going to be pi over 4. And this is probably where most of your work's going to be. And so it's going to be with this arithmetic. So we're going to go up here. I'm going to put that pi over 4, ladies and gentlemen. And we're going to repeat the process. Meaning, what's midway between 0 and pi over 4 now? So we take the 0, we add pi over 4, we divide by 2. This will give you pi over 4 again, divided by 2, or multiply, or I should say, write this as the horizontal definition of division, so we know what to do. So you multiply by the reciprocal of 2, and this becomes pi over 8 now. All right, pi over 8. So, ladies and gentlemen, here you go. This is now the midpoint between 0 and pi over 4. We need the midpoint between pi over 4 and pi over 2. So we're going to add the numbers. This is what's going to give us the midpoint, and divide by 2. And remember here, you're going to have to add fractions with different denominators. And so how you do that, okay, is you need to have the same denominator. The denominators are the numbers on the bottom here. That has to be the same. So here's that trick we were using in class. I could make the denominator the same for the second fraction if I multiply the bottom by 2, but I have to do that to the top, because this is really multiplying that pi over 2 by the number 1, because 2 over 2 is 1. Now, what's nice about this little shortcut trick is you get pi over 4 now, plus 2 pi over 4, and that's still divided by 2. Now you have the same denominator. The denominator is 4, so this becomes 3 pi over 4 divided by 2, which is 3 pi over 4 divided by 2. 3 pi over 4 times 1/2. Multiply across, you get 3 pi over 8. So ladies and gentlemen, 3 pi over 8 here. Okay? So that is how, this is where most of your work's going to be. And this is going to be required. You have to find these particular locations for this curve here. Okay? So, all right, this is the deal. We need these numbers. Now, I'm going to get rid of all of this information here. Okay? And at this point, you're ready. You're ready to sketch the curve. You're going to sketch a sine curve. So you have to remember what sine looks like and how it behaves, okay? So sine always starts over here on the x-axis, and it goes up to the highest point, comes down back to the x-axis, goes to the lowest point, and then back to the x-axis yet again. So now you can sketch your curve. And ladies and gentlemen, okay, you'd never guess my parents are artists, but they are, and there it is, ladies and gentlemen. That's how it works here. Okay, now, like in lecture, I'm going to get rid of this portion here, like in lecture. And what I'm going to do here, you're pretty much done with the sketch, but remember what I want to ask you as well. It isn't just this important information, what's your amplitude, what's your period, what's the interval of one cycle. Okay, those are all important things to know, but I want to know if you can even read the curve, and this is why on the worksheet I asked various questions like the x-intercepts. Remember, the x-intercepts is where your sine curve touches the x-axis. And so the x-intercepts occur when x is the value 0, when x is the value pi over 4, and they occur when x is the value pi over 2 here. Because the x-intercept really has, a definition. It's the x value and that y-coordinate value is 0. Now, we're not notating that, but I just want to let you guys know this is the meaning of y, or I should say it's the definition of an x-intercept, but it's why you want to label your sine curve, because it gives you information about the curve. A picture's worth 1,000 words. You want to know what those words are. And then you say, well, okay, what about this value here? So in class, remember, if you're standing on this curve, you're at the top of a hill. Okay? And again, that's the maximum altitude right here. The maximum altitude is 3. So they're going to ask you, or I'm going to ask you, what's the maximum value here? And that's 3. And similarly, what's the minimum value? And maybe we should just, try to be a little somewhat consistent with colors. The minimum value is, well, are you in a valley? And the answer is yes, you're in a valley over here. What's the altitude? This is on the y-axis, your altitude. Okay, we can kind of draw a straight highlight there. So that minimum value is going to be -3. So let's highlight that. Minimum value, maximum value of the sine curve, and that's really why you need the altitude or the amplitude. And the maximum value occurs when x is pi over 8, so that's what you're looking at, okay? The minimum value occurs when x is 3 pi over 8. So I want to label that as well, the x values. Because a picture is worth 1,000 words, you also need the words. And that's really what we're looking for, ladies and gentlemen. All right. So, you can rewatch that video if you like. I'm going to get rid of, if I can, some of this, stuff. And, at the end of the day, that's the meaning of, graphing, that sine curve using all this information. And that's what I'm going to be looking for, ladies and gentlemen, okay? And that's number 1. And now we're going to go to number 3, because we're going to try to do some odd numbered questions. You have answers in the worksheet for the evens. Although it doesn't have, these values, you have to find them yourself. Okay. Number 3 now. I'm going to look at my website to get number 3. I'm not going to scroll over and over again. On my website, number 3, I'm looking at it. Okay. Okay, well, where is that? Well, right here. Number 3, y is minus sine pi x. Okay. All right, so I want to emphasize a few things here. Again, this minus sign in front of sine is thinking of this as a -1 times sine. So that the a value here, okay, is -1. The number in front of the x, that's our k value, well, that's pi. So, ladies and gentlemen, amplitude is the absolute value of the a value, which is 1. Okay. My period is 2 pi over k. K here is pi. And so I can cancel the pi, and now my period is 2 here. I now have the definition of the interval of one cycle. It starts at 0, and it ends at 2. So like before, I have some nice information, okay, that we're going to use to start to graph this curve. Now be careful. The graph is going to be for sine. We know how the sine curve behaves, but there's a -1 in front. So we're going to remember how to reflect that about the x-axis. I'm going to bring in, again, this Cartesian coordinate. But this time, ladies and gentlemen, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to take a picture of it. All right, I'm going to save that. I want to save it to my images. Not quite sure how to do that. Want to save it to the images. Come on, where are you, images? Just save to files, I guess, on my iPad. I don't know. All right. I'm sure somebody will tell me one day. I don't know. Maybe we'll save it here, called graph. Anyway. Okay, stop fooling around. Now let's use the amplitude. The amplitude is 1. So let's label the y-axis. It's not to scale. +1, -1. And then our interval of one cycle is from 0 to 2. So here we go. +1, -1, interval of one cycle is 0 to 2. Now halfway, ladies and gentlemen, halfway between 0 and 2, you guys should be able to see that here. halfway between 0 and 2 is 1. And then halfway between 0 and 1 is 1/2. Now, halfway between 1 and 2, right, you might say, I don't know what that is. Well, add them, divide by 2, and 1 plus 2 will be 3, so this becomes 3/2. There you go. So we're now going to graph sine, ladies and gentlemen, but be very careful. It's reflected about the x-axis because you have this -1 sign here. So here we go. I'm going to draw that ghost curve here. Look at this for sine. But that's not the answer. We're going to reflect every point about the x-axis. So if a point's on the x-axis, you can't reflect it anywhere. It's still on the x-axis. Down at the minimum, on the x-axis, back at the maximum, down here on the x-axis. Now this is going to be, ladies and gentlemen, the minus sine curve. So let's get rid of, again, that reference sine. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we're able to answer all the questions we need to. Remember, they're going to want to know where are the x-intercepts. Okay? Any point where the curve crosses the x-axis. There we go. It's on the x-axis. That happens when x is 0, because that's the 0 value. It happens when x is 1 and when x is 2. Okay, yes, it has a coordinate x comma 0. The maximum value, you're on top of the hill. The maximum value is 1. There's the altitude. And then that happens when x is 3/2, because you're standing up here again. Okay? You're in the valley right in here when x is 1/2. But that valley has a minimum altitude of -1, and then that happens again when x is 1/2. Okay. So I want to have you guys take a look at this if you can. I'm going to get rid of all this other stuff. And as you guys can see, I didn't go through all the nice colored pictures for this, but that's the graph at number 3 now. You know. All right. So I'm going to look again and we say, okay, what does number 5 look like here? Let's see if we can. This is always a little weird. Why are you off skew there? Anyway. Y is 1/3 cosine 2 pi x. Okay. We're going to complete this process yet again. So, okay. So remember what we do here. We need, this is the what? This is the a value. And then this is the k value. So my amplitude is the absolute value of a, which is the absolute value of 1/3. Your period is 2 pi over k. K is 2 pi in this case, and so that means my period is 1. And that's nice because my interval of 1 cycle goes from 0 to 1 now. So again, I have all that information just by reading what we're looking at. And here's my period. Okay. So let's start to graph. Okay. The amplitude here is 1/3. This is not to scale. So what I'm going to do again is I'm going to say, okay, here up here you're 1/3. Down here you're minus 1/3. You go from 0 to 1. Okay? Now remember, we need all those halfway points. So halfway between 0 and 1. Now if you don't know, you say 0 plus 1 divided by 2. That's going to give you 1/2. Halfway again between 0, where the 0 is, and 1/2, you say, okay, 0 plus 1/2 divided by 2, which is 1/2 divided by 2, which is 1/2 divided by 2, 1/2 times 1/2, which is 1/4. So here we go, 1/4. One half plus 1 now divided by 2. We need halfway between 1/2 and 1. So you have a whole number added with a fraction. You replace the 1, ladies and gentlemen, with 2/2 because you do need that denominator to be the same. They have to be like down here, 2/2. Okay. So when you do the arithmetic, we get 1 plus 2. This is going to be 3/2 divided by 2, which is 3/2 divided by 2. 3/2 times 1/2, better known as 3/4. There we go. And there it is, ladies and gentlemen. All right, don't forget, this is going to be the cosine curve, so you're going to need to know, again, how cosine behaves. Okay, so we need to know how cosine behaves. Now, cosine starts, ladies and gentlemen, when x is 0, cosine starts at the highest value. And then it comes down to the x-axis, and it goes down to the lowest value, and goes back to the x-axis, and then finally it comes back up to the highest value. So we do need to know the behavior of cosine, and that's why I highlight that. Okay? Okay, let's sketch the curve. And there you go. There's your cosine curve. Okay, but again, the kind of questions, since a picture is worth 1,000 words, hopefully we know what we're looking at. The points where you cross the x-axis are called x-intercepts. So that happens when x is 1/4. It happens when x is 3/4. We want to know where the maximum value of cosine is. That's where you're on top of the highest hill. And for cosine, that'll happen on 2 locations. So the maximum value is 1/3. However, that happens when x is 0 and when x is 1. This is the location here. Okay. There's only one minimum value, and that's negative 1/3. And that happens when x is 1/2. So ladies and gentlemen, again, like before, this is where you have the 2 locations, maximum value, and again, it happens at 1, it happens at 0, and again, you have the minimum value of the function being negative 1/3, and then that happens at x is 1/2. There you go. And that's what we're doing. Minimum value negative 1/3 happens at x is 1/2. Maximum value being positive 1/3 happens when x is 0, x is 1, and the meaning again, well, anyway, we're going to keep it that way. And then you got the x-intercepts. Okay. So ladies and gentlemen, if it helps you see by colors, then so be it. But, you don't have to do that. If you look at every curve, they're not going to have people standing in hills and valleys and highlighters. But ladies and gentlemen, there you go. This is pretty much the information they're looking for. And that was number 3. No, I'm sorry. That has to be number 5. I made a mistake. Yeah, it's number 5. I apologize. It's number 5. Okay, that brings us to number 7. All right, number 7, ladies and gentlemen. Let's try number 7. I'm going to bring that all the way down here. And I'm going to look back. Number 7, we have, where are you, number 7? Y is 4 sine 2x. There you go. I think now I fixed it. Y is 4 sine 2x. Ah. There we go. Okay. Yeah. Number 7. Y is 4 sine 2x. Okay. So now, ladies and gentlemen, here we go. Again, we have an a value. And we need the k value again. K is always the number multiplied to x. So remember, the amplitude is the absolute value of a. In this case, it's 4, so it's the absolute value of 4. And then my period is 2 pi over k, which is 2, and then that equals pi. So the interval of one cycle becomes 0 to pi. Sorry. Okay. So let's use our information. So since the amplitude is 4, I'm going to sketch this. Positive 4, negative 4. 0 to pi. Now half a pi, ladies and gentlemen, remember you're going from 0 to pi. Half a pi is pi over 2. And let's try to be a little bit more. There we go. Again, this is not to scale. If you wanted, you could do 3 lines above, 3 lines below, and maybe you make a nicer curve, or at least something that looks a little bit more, I forget the term, but I'll remember. Gotta get my coffee. Anyway, we need more halfway points. Halfway between 0 and pi over 2. If you don't know what that is, do your arithmetic. 0 plus pi over 2 is pi over 2. That's the numerator. We're dividing by 2. So pi over 2 divided by 2 becomes pi over 2 times that 1/2. You multiply your fractions horizontally across this way. That gives you pi over 4. So ladies and gentlemen, you got pi over 4. And then again, the other halfway, the last halfway. Halfway between pi over 2 plus pi, don't forget to add them and divide by 2. So you're going to have here a situation where you have a fraction plus a whole number. Remember, you might say Where's my denominator just for pi? Well, put that over 1. And then you go, but I don't have the same denominator. Okay? They're not like. Well, since that's 2, I can get the second denominator to be a 2 if I multiply it by 2. But I have to multiply the top by 2 because 2 over 2 is 1. So anyway, we get pi now over 2 plus 2 pi now over 2. And now they have the same denominator. So you're going to get pi plus 2 pi is 3 pi. That's divided by 2 over 2. So you get 3 pi over 2 divided by 2. 3 pi over 2 times 1/2 gives you 3 pi over 4. So ladies and gentlemen, here we go. 3 pi over 4. And that's the arithmetic you guys need to do here, okay, to get all these important locations of x-intercepts and so on. And of course, this is radian measures, so these are real numbered values, symbolically represented by pi, right? 3.14 approximately. So ladies and gentlemen, this is the deal here. Okay, now you say, what do? We got to go back to the curve, and we say, what kind of curve is this? This is a sine curve. So you have to know how the sine curve behaves. And of course, we're not reflecting about the x-axis because a is 4. So, okay, I know how the sine curve behaves. It always starts at this x-axis, and then it goes up to the highest point, comes back down to the x-axis, goes to the lowest point, and then comes back to the x-axis. That's how sine behaves. And we draw and sketch. And so now it looks a little bit better. Yes, it's not to scale, but okay. But this is the sine curve. And that's pretty much what they want you to do. But since a picture is worth 1,000 words, ladies and gentlemen, let's remember this. Okay? It's worth 1,000 words, meaning we need the x-intercepts. And I encourage you guys, this is the reason why you draw the picture, and this is the reason why you go through the arithmetic, is so you can get all the information about the curve you're looking at. Okay? Because this is going to represent some physical phenomena, some model, and we need these values. Okay, so when you cross the x-axis, that's where the curve crosses the x-axis. Happens when x is 0. X is pi over 2. X is pi. The maximum values, the highest value of sine is 4. And you say, where does that happen? Well, it happens only in one location. If this helps you, put that person up there, guy or girl. X is pi over 4. That's where it happens. That's the corresponding x value that it happens. But the maximum value is 4. The minimum value, you're standing in a valley over here. So the minimum value will be -4, and then that happens when x is 3 pi over 4. Okay? So you have all of that kind of information that they care about, we care about, and that's how you graph this curve. Okay, what is this? Number 7. All right. Okay. So number 9, if I go back and take a look, number 9, if we go all the way down here, all right. Y equals 3. This is going to be a cosine curve. And now we have x over 2, it looks like. Okay. So I copied 9 down here for you. So let's read this. We have an a value of 3. And right in here, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to highlight this information. This is where students are going to maybe make a mistake because they don't know what k is. Remember, k is the number multiplied to x. So you have a number divided by x, and you say, I just don't know what that is. Yes, you do. 1/2 x, ladies and gentlemen, is x over 2. So what that means is k is not 2. K, ladies and gentlemen, this is my k value. It is 1/2. Okay? So sometimes I think it's helpful to write that down and say, hey, here's my k value. It's 1/2. That's what I do. Okay, that's what I do, ladies and gentlemen. I write that k value down. So when I go through my definitions, I have the amplitude being the absolute value of 3, which is 3. I got my period being 2 pi over k, which is 2 pi over 1/2, which is 2 pi divided by 1/2, and that becomes 2 pi times 2 over 1. So my period actually is 2 pi. So let's write this down. We get our amplitude is 3. Period is 2 pi. The interval of one cycle is 0 to 2 pi here. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, there you guys go. This is all the arithmetic you need, and we can now start to sketch the curve. Okay. So again, we're going to use the amplitude. It's not going to be to scale, but I'm going to go up 3 and down 3 instead. Okay, so the amplitude now is 3. Oh, it looks kind of like it's slightly to scale, at least on the y-axis. So my amplitude is 3. Good. The interval of one cycle goes from 0 to 2 pi. So this is like from 0 to 2 pi. So let's think about this. Halfway between 0 and 2 pi, if you don't know, add them divided by 2. So it's 2 pi over 2. The halfway point is just pi. Okay? Halfway from 0 to pi will be pi over 2. Add them and divide by 2. And then halfway, pi plus 2 pi over 2. Add those, divide by 2. We get 3 pi over 2. So, ladies and gentlemen, here you go. We now have to recall, what curve are we drawing? We're going to draw the what? Cosine curve. So you have to know how cosine behaves. Cosine behaves starting out at the maximum value. And then it comes down to the x-axis, and then it goes to the minimum value, it goes back to the x-axis, and then it's at a maximum value again. So you have to know the cosine curve, ladies and gentlemen. Okay? So now we get to sketch very easily. Down to the x-axis, lowest point, back up to the x-axis, highest point. There you go. Now a picture is worth 1,000 words. We're going to need to know what this really means. Where is the x-intercept? Where you cross the x-axis. At pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2. So we're going to find those x-intercepts. And this is just the location of the x-axis, because the definition is where x, we have some x value and the y-coordinate value is always 0. That's the location on that curve. Now, the maximum value, the reason we get the amplitude is because it gives us the maximum. The reason, well, we get the amplitude, it also gives us the minimum. That's why we have the amplitude. This is where we have that amplitude value. That's why we label it. That's why we find it. So I know the maximum value is 3, and you say, when does that happen? Okay, it happens twice for cosine. It happens where it starts at 0 and where it ends at 2 pi, looks like. And something is bothering me. Yes, I made a mistake, ladies and gentlemen. 2 pi times 2 is not 2 pi. I apologize. We made a mistake. That's 4 pi. Oh my God. Well, if I find it, that means it's not a mistake. But I went back and, oh, we want to really emphasize this to you guys, okay? 2 pi times 2 right in here is 4 pi. That's going to change the picture that's worth 1,000 words. I apologize. All right. Well, if I find it, it's not a mistake. So let's do this. Let's do this. Let's do this. Okay. 0 to 4 pi. Now that's going to make my halfway points easier. Halfway between 0 and 4 pi is 4 pi over 2. That's 2 pi. Halfway between 0 and 2 pi, 2 pi over 2. That's pi. And then halfway between 2 pi and 4 pi, that's 6 pi over 2. That'll be 3 pi. Okay, we fixed it. Good. I want you guys to see that. Period is 4 pi. All right. So let's change the x-intercepts. So x will be pi and x is 3 pi. The largest value happens when x is 0 and x is 4 pi. This is where you're standing at the top of your hills. You're in a valley at 2 pi. So that'll be 2 pi here, ladies and gentlemen. And there you go. There's your picture that is worth 1,000 words. All right. That brings us now to number 11. Let's look at the browser for number 11. So that's going to be y equals, for number 11, -2 sine of x over 4. Okay? All right. Let's try not to make a mistake on this one. Okay. All righty. Let's try not to make a mistake on this one. Number 11 here. Here's my a value, number 11. And then let's focus on what happens here. Like the past example, this is where students make that mistake. This is really, remember, this is supposed to be k times x. So x over 4 is 1/4 x. So ladies and gentlemen, there you go. It's 1/4 x. All right. So now our amplitude is the absolute value of -2 because that's what the a value is. Your a is -2. So the amplitude is the absolute value of that. Absolute value of -2 is +2. So we got our amplitude. Period, ladies and gentlemen, is 2 pi over k. Now k is 1/4. Which is 2 pi divided by 1/4, right? So you say is 2 pi divided by 1/4, which gives you 2 pi times 4. Your period is actually 8 pi. So here you go, ladies and gentlemen. Period is 8 pi. So the interval of one cycle now is going to become, you start at 0, you end at 8 pi. All right, there you guys go. Okay. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. So now let's do this here. We're going to start to draw. Oh, where is it? We're going to draw. What are we going to draw? Let's get this here. Oh, we're going to bring in our picture. Okay. Amplitude is 2. All right. So, I mean, you can draw it to scale. You don't have to draw it to scale. Maybe I'll put, since it's 2, we'll put a 2 so people don't get confused. It's 2 and negative 2. Okay. And then this goes from 0 all the way to what again? 8 pi. So we go from 0 to 8 pi. Now finding halfway points again should be easy because of the nice easy even number. Like 0 plus 8 pi is 8 pi. Divided by 2, 4 pi. So that's halfway. Again, 0 plus 4 pi is 4 pi. Divided by 2 becomes 2 pi. So we can get the halfway marks as well. And then 4 pi plus 8 pi is 12 pi. Divided by 2 gives you 6 pi. So ladies and gentlemen, there you go. This is kind of a nice thing when you have that fraction for k. So that's great. So we have to remember a few things now. How does the sine curve behave? And then we got to be careful because a now is negative 2. So we have the sine curve and we have the a value. And so it's going to be reflected about the x-axis. Sine is reflected. So since we know how sine behaves, it starts at the origin, goes to the largest value, goes back to the x-axis, down to the smallest value, back to the x-axis. Now this is sine, but that's not the curve we need to draw. We need to reflect this about the x-axis. So the x-intercept doesn't get reflected because it's on the x-axis. What gets reflected is the largest value. It now becomes the smallest value. The point on the x-axis doesn't get reflected about the x-axis. It's on the x-axis, but the largest value now becomes the smallest value. So the smallest value now becomes the largest value. So we're really reflecting all these points. So it looks like this, all these points. All these points. And again, all these points get reflected above that x-axis. So here's the curve that we want to draw. So we can remove the reference in red. That's the sine curve. But we need to reflect it about the x-axis because this is a value is negative. Okay? All right. Good job. Now, let's answer the questions. X-intercepts happen when x is 0, x is 4 pi, x is 8 pi. The maximum value is 2, and that happens when x is 6 pi. The minimum value is negative 2, and that happens when x is 2 pi. Because you're standing again on top of a hill, and you're standing in a valley at those locations, and the maximum value is simply the altitude, and the minimum value is that altitude too, but you're below sea level. So ladies and gentlemen, there it is, of course. And there you go. So this is number what? This is number 11 now. All right, number 11. Good job. That makes us now down to number 13 here. So number 13, if we look at that, let's go here. Y is minus cosine x over 2. Okay? Now remember, if they start with a minus sign, that's really -1 times -1 times cosine. So my a value now is -1. Oh, yet again, we have this x over 2. So it has to be k times x. That means that k will be 1/2. Okay? So we have that same situation. Now let's use our definitions. For the amplitude is the absolute value of -1, which is +1. My period is 2 pi over k. K is 1/2 now. So it's 2 pi divided by 1/2, or 2 pi times 2 over 1. Your period, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be 4 pi. Amplitude period. Interval of 1 cycle. 0 to what? 4 pi. And there you go. So the amplitude is 1. Again, this is not going to be to scale. So we're going to go up 1 and down 1. Zero to 4 pi. Half of 4 pi is 2 pi, and then half of 2 pi is pi. And then you go, what's halfway between 2 pi and 4 pi? Well, add them. That's 6 pi. Divided by 2, you get that what? 3 pi, ladies and gentlemen. So do your arithmetic there. You can get these values. And I'm not going to draw it to scale. Okay, I'm going to put that here. I'm going to use an extra dash line. So it's not to scale. I think it helps me a little bit in drawing. So anyway. So we're using the interval of 1 cycle or amplitude. And now, ladies and gentlemen, let's double check here. What kind of curve is this? You say, hey, this is going to be the cosine curve. However, it's reflected about the x-axis because your a value is -1, that constant of a negative in front. So draw cosine, draw the ghost curve. Cosine starts at the highest value. It goes to the x-intercept, then it goes to the lowest value, and then the highest, back to the x-intercept, then the highest value. So this is the reference curve. This is cosine, but the -1 says reflect this, so that's what we're going to need to do. So we're going to reflect it. And so now, instead of the largest value, you're at the smallest value. You're back to the x-axis. The smallest value becomes the largest. You get back to the x-axis. Largest value becomes the smallest. There you go. There it is, ladies and gentlemen. There's the curve they want you to graph. Now, remember, we need to notate where the x-intercepts are. Happens when x is pi. X is 3 pi. Now let's find the maximum and minimum value. Now remember, down here you're in a valley. Down here you're in a valley. So that valley has an altitude. The minimum value is -1, and that happens when x is 0 and when x is 4 pi. You have a maximum value. Where's the maximum? Right up here, and it happens when x is 2 pi. So the maximum value is 1 when x is 2 pi. So you have all of the information you need. And there you go, number 13. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to 15. Y is sine 4x. Let's double check. All right. This time, ladies and gentlemen, with y is sine 4x, nothing's multiplied to that sine, so that's going to be a. So 1 times anything is itself. So in this case, a is 1. Now remember here, k here is 4. There's a k value there. So the amplitude is the absolute value of 1, which is 1. And then the period, which is 2 pi, over the k value, k is 4. So this reduces to pi over 2 as a fraction. Your interval of 1 cycle becomes 0 to what? Pi over 2. Amplitude is 1. Period is pi over 2. So you go from 0 to pi over 2, that interval of 1 cycle. Here's that k value. All right, here we go. So since our amplitude is 1, largest value, smallest value on the y-axis. That's why we have the amplitude. The interval of 1 cycle goes from 0 to pi over 2. And let's do it longer. So we're back again trying to find the midpoints. 0 to pi over 2. So midway between 0 and pi over 2, ladies and gentlemen, add them, divide by 2. 0 plus pi over 2 is pi over 2. Divided by 2, and then we get pi over 2 divided by 2, which is pi over 2 times 1/2, and that gives us pi over 4. So here you go, pi over 4. Okay, now halfway between 0 and pi over 4. So you add those, you divide by 2. And pi over 4, we can skip a step and say, is that pi over 4 divided by 2? Yes. Is that pi over 4 times 1/2? Yes. What does that give you? Pi over 8. And there you go. And then you get to add pi over 4 and pi over 2 and find halfway there again. So you say pi over 4 plus pi over 2 divided by 2. We need this halfway mark between these two. Okay, by now you guys know that little trick. Multiply the 2 to the top and 2 to the bottom to get a like fraction. So this becomes pi over 4 plus 2 pi over 4 divided by 2. So pi over 4 plus 2 pi over 4 becomes 3 pi over 4. Can I say divide by 2? Yes. 3 pi over 4 times 1/2 gives you 3 pi over 8. Multiply horizontally. There you go. Three pi over 8. And there it is. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's take a look. What kind of curve is this? This is going to be, again, this is sine. And it's not reflected about the x-axis because a is a positive 1. So we got to remember how the sine curve behaves. How sine behaves, again, starts on the x-axis. You go up to the maximum value, you go back down to the x-axis, then you go to the minimum value, you go back to the x-axis. So here we go. And there you go, ladies and gentlemen. So let's answer the relevant questions again. Picture's worth 1,000 words. Your x-intercept is going to be on the x-axis. That's where the curve hits the x-axis. It hits the x-axis when x is 0, when x is pi over 4, and when x is pi over 2. The maximum value is positive 1. The minimum value is negative 1. And you say, why is that? Because of the amplitude. Okay. And that's why you found that amplitude. Okay. And you say, when do I have a max? Well, you're standing on top of the hill when x is pi over 8. So that's what we want to locate here. You're in a valley when x is 3 pi over 8. And that's all the relevant information about this curve, ladies and gentlemen. There we go. That brings us now to 17, which is the last odd question in the worksheet. And so this one's going to be, why is cosine 3 pi over x? Why is cosine 3 pi over x? Okay, like the last question, if you don't see a number, well, that a value is 1. Just like the last question, a is 1. K, ladies and gentlemen, is 3 pi. So here's my k. So my amplitude is the absolute value of 1, which is 1. And then the period is 2 pi over k. K is 3 pi, ladies and gentlemen. That means my period is 2/3 because the k value, or I should say the pi value, cancels. So let's see. Amplitude, period. Interval of 1 cycle, 0 to 2/3. Okay, now don't forget, at this point, we're going to bring in that graph. What happened to the graph? Oh, is the graph gone? I guess I have to draw it for the last question. My amplitude is 1, it's not to scale. Go up 1, 1, 2, 3, go down -1. That period is 0 to 2/3. Okay? Well, I mean, interval is 0 to 2/3. The period is actually 2/3. Okay. Halfway. So 0 plus 2/3 divided by 2 gives us
2/3 divided by 2, or 2/3 times 1/2. The 2's cancel, and halfway is 1/3. So we're going through that arithmetic. 1/3. We need another halfway. 0 to 1/3. So we say 0 to 1/3 divided by 2 becomes 1/3 divided by 2. And you can say it this way, 1/3 divided by 2, which is 1/3 times 1/2. That's how we take a fraction divided by a whole number, multiply horizontally across, gives you 1/6. All right, ladies and gentlemen, 1/6. Oops, wrong place. Right there. Now we need halfway between 1/3 and 2/3. This is the last halfway mark. 1/3 plus 2/3 divided by 2 gives us 3/3 divided by 2, which is 1 divided by 2. So the last location here is actually 1/2. Okay. So take a look, ladies and gentlemen, at all the arithmetic we did so we can graph this. And I'm going to erase it now so you guys can actually, scroll back and watch this on the video if you need to. And again, this is going to be the cosine curve. Cosine. So we have to know how cosine behaves. And how cosine behaves is this way. It always starts at the maximum value, and then it comes down to the x-axis and x-intercept. It goes to a minimum value and back to the x-axis, and then finally back at a maximum value. So I'm now able to sketch cosine. And we can do a little bit better job, maybe. All right. We're now able to answer a lot of information about the curve. The x-axis there, the x-intercepts happen when x is 1/6 and when x is 1/2. You're at a maximum value at 2 locations for cosine. That maximum value is the amplitude. It's 1. Happens when x is 0 and when x is 2/3. At the endpoints, you're at a minimum value. So the minimum value is -1, and that happens when x is 1/3. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. There it is. And this is how you sketch, ladies and gentlemen, some sines and cosines. And that's how, and that's the odd numbered solutions to the worksheet I gave you guys. Now, if you said, what about the evens, Mr. Judge? Well, I have the answers for you. I don't have all those locations. I think we want to we don't have all those. We should probably go back and put some x-intercepts, I think, maybe. I don't know. Maybe you can find them. But we have all this other information, and that's what I want you guys to do. I want you guys to find the x-intercepts as well. Okay? The maximum and minimum values. And ladies and gentlemen, I did do some solutions for you for the evens as well. Or these are the answers for the evens. But I didn't put the special x-intercepts. I'm leaving that for you guys. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed this solution here, and take care, stay safe. I'm going to scroll out, and you guys have a wonderful, wonderful weekend, okay? I'll see you in class.